everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Unscripted and Unchoreographed. I'm your host, Niamh, the actor, and
I'm Sarah, the dancer.
Today we are very excited to have a wonderful artist in.
James O'Donnell. When you say artist, I think I should clarify that by saying I'm a theatre director and a acting coach and a playwright and a theatre maker, I guess. I'm a bit of everything. Yeah, I do a bit of all of it, and stage managed and did a bit of acting as well in the past. But I'll put the old acting costume on again. I haven't done any dancing yet, Sarah. You'd be pleased to hear. I don't think the dance. I know. I don't think the dance world's ready for it, to be honest with you. But I never say never. I'm a person who believes that things come for you if you need it, if you want it. So we'll see.
I suppose the first question to start with is, how did you get into the arts?
Yeah, I suppose it was a weird journey, I think, because my parents were not in the arts. None of my family were in the arts. So I suppose the earliest recollection of arts was in school. And I remember in primary school, right, they had that we were doing the Just So tales. I don't know if you know those, of like animals and things like that. Well, anyway, I can remember my first line as well. I wasn't cast in it. I think I was playing bongos in the kind of, I say orchestra. It was a noise. And one boy, and he was from Australia. He was in the play, the Just So tales. He was playing the cheetah. And he left, like midterm, he left. And I remember the teacher asking me, would you like to play the cheetah? And I was like, yeah, okay. And all I had to do was I had to run on, stand in the middle of the stage and say, I'm a cheetah and I'm faster than any of you. But because he had an Australian accent, I just copied his accent because I had no way of doing my own accent. So I literally ran, and I remember the teacher having to keep going, oh, no, you have to run on, stand in the middle and say it and get off. Because I'd like run on and run off. And then as I'm going off, I'm going like, I'm a cheetah, I'm faster than any of you. And she kept going, no, go to the middle and stop. I was kind of hyperactive as a kid. And that was my first recollection of it, was that line. And I don't even know why I remember that line, because I don't remember anything else of that school really at all. But I remember that. And then I remember when at that school, like I was singing in I don't even know why, like in assembly, I'd sing every now and again. And then I played bongos. I hit bongos really hard. And then I got to senior school and there wasn't any drama. There was art. We could do art. I went to quite a rough school in South London. We did a bit of art. And I remember we did Romeo and Juliet as our sort of English thing. And I remember it was an all-boys school and it came round and I was cast as Juliet and everyone laughed and it was just humiliating. It was awful. I mean, surprising how my career's panned out later because it wasn't a very good start. And I hated it. I hated it so much. But then I remember a bit later that my sister was doing drama lessons, I think. I think my mother had done amateur dramatics and my sister was involved in amateur dramatics. And like years ago when my dad was a kid, he'd been in a film, like a tiny little clip in a film. Like tiny thing. He had to jump out of a barrel and run around it. And that's all it was in this old film. And when he was a kid, and he played the Artful Dodger, I think, at school or something in some play in the East End. He was from East London, from Poplar, East London. So my sister and my mother were doing kind of amateur dramatics. And my sister used to go to this class and it was an acting class. And I went there really just out of doing something. I think looking back, I was always doing something because, again, I was quite hyperactive. So I was always doing karate and cubs and scouts and venture scouts and army cadets and air cadets and sea cadets and athletics and rugby. And I think my mother hated me. She just wanted me out of the house, She just wanted to get rid of me. So I was always doing something. And then my sister went to these classes and I went along. And then I got involved in a bit of amateur dramatics. And again, it wasn't really an option to do it as a career. I didn't even think about it as a career. Wasn't on the radar at all. Just something I was doing because it was fun, and I had some friends there. And then I left school. I did horrendously in my GCSEs. As you can tell, I'm from London. I'm not from Ireland. Sorry, listeners. And I did really bad in my GCSEs. I kind of lost interest. My first school, the all-boys school, closed down because it was so bad. Nobody wanted to go there. when I was told I was going there, I burst into tears. And the boy next door, he was going there as well. And we both cried because had such a bad reputation as being such a really violent school. It's one of those schools. It's like kind of that school, Glastonbury, and then there was a Borstal. Like the next stop was like reform, young offenders kind of place. And it was rough. It was really rough. But then that closed down after 2 years because nobody wanted to go there. And so then I went to a different school and I kind of lost interest in schooling. I drifted through and I did terrible on my GCSEs. And then I left school, and I remember like we had these kind of career guidance. And because I was really into sports, I was like, the best they thought of me was a kind of like working in a leisure centre as someone who puts out cones and things like that. That was it. That was the highlight of their ambition for me. And so I really didn't know what I wanted to do. My mum was working in the greengrocers, one of her many jobs, because we were a one-parent family. My dad had left. They were divorced when I was about 11. And so, she had about 2 or 3 jobs, and she's working in greengrocers. And the lady who worked there, her husband owned a company. And she said, look, my son's coming out of school. He's not got a clue. He doesn't know what he's doing. And they were looking for an office junior. And so I went into quantity surveying, which for anybody who doesn't know what quantity surveying is, it is possibly the most boring, moribund, dull job you could ever imagine. It's essentially counting things and then saying, oh, that costs this much. It's really boring. But it would have been a really good life, right? I mean, I'd have been earning a lot of money. But I was in that for I spent 4 years in this job, right? But after about 6 months, I thought, this isn't for me. I don't know what I'm doing. I hadn't got a clue. I was lost. I really tried my hardest to get into it. I brought work home with me. I did all the kind of things. I had a briefcase, ridiculous, something stupid. Looking back, I was kind of playing the role of someone who works at an office, but I'm not. I had no real interest in the actual job. But it was in some nice buildings and stuff we worked on in London. Then I got to go to site visits and stuff. And then after about 3 years, the building boom in London kind of started to stop. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I remember having a conversation with one of the guys in the office, and he would have been in his mid-30s, I guess. And he said, are you enjoying this? You don't look like you're enjoying this. And I said, I'm not really. And he said, get out. He said, do something else. He said, you got the rest of your life. And I was like, it was from 16 till 20. Because you could leave at sort of 15, 16 in the UK if you wanted to. And so I did, because I hate school and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I should have gone and done maybe a university, but I had such bad grades, I probably wouldn't have gotten anywhere. So anyway, I sort of did that, and I was doing a bit of amateur dramatics. And I also was doing, at the time, I was doing hospital radio, right? I really liked radio. And it was at the Royal Marsden, which is a cancer hospital. My mother worked there as well as a cleaner, and I worked there. I used to finish work and I'd go up there on a Thursday, and I had we did a show from 7 till 10 on a Thursday, and I really loved it. It was so much fun. And one of the guys there worked for the BBC gramophone department, like the BBC's like RTE, the radio department. They look after they have like a kind of catalogue of loads of records, lots of classical music and stuff. Well, he said to me one day, he said, do you fancy going to the theatre? And I was like, oh, I don't know, really. I'd been to pantomimes, but I'd never gone to a real play, like a serious. I'd never seen a serious play. I didn't know what it was. And he said, oh, I'm going, like he said, with my gramophone pass, from the BBC gramophone pass, I can get you a cheap ticket, and we could go to the Barbican and we could see a play. And I was like, okay. So he gave me this pass, and I remember it. It was like Sharon something on the pass. And he said, no, that's okay. Just show it briefly, show it quickly, and then, they'll give you a discount on a ticket, right? So we went to the Barbican, which is this big art centre in the city of London. And I don't even know why he chose that, but he said, let's go and see that. And it was The Alchemist by Ben Jonson, and it was by a company called the Royal Shakespeare Company. And it was directed by Sam Mendes. And I can honestly say a big light bulb exploded in my head. I mean, literally exploded. I was mesmerized. I came out and went, I don't even know what I've just seen, but I want to do that. I just want to do that. It was so, I get emotional thinking about it now. It's just so sexy and exciting and everything that I didn't have in my life. And it was brilliant. The actors were amazing. And he's a fantastic director of theatre. And I wish he did more theatre, but he's busy doing, James Bond films. And it was absolutely astonishing. I mean, there was one moment, and I remember it now. There are actually really two moments that stick out in my mind. One moment was where they had like this kind of semicircular set, right? I don't even know the story of The Alchemist. The Alchemist is a story of people conning people. They're like the plagues in town. So all the rich people leave town and the servants in the house get together and go, look, we can make loads of money if we get these people to come in and give us gold and stuff. And we'll just, it ends up there's like sort of 5 or 6 different people that they get money from. And they're making a fortune in this house while, the person who owns the house is in the country. Towards the end then, the plague abates and they come back. And he had this amazing moment. And I still to this day, even though like I work in theatre, I should know how it works. But it seemed to me kind of magic that we went from being inside, and it was a semicircular built with like room with these doors at the back. And then all of a sudden it seemed in a flash of an eye, the lighting changed. There was nothing left inside the room. Somehow some numbers had gone onto the doors. And all of a sudden guys with umbrellas and different lighting, we were outside the house, knocking on the door. That blew my mind. I was like, that is just the most amazing thing. I've never seen anything before like it in my life. It was like in the flash of an instant. Sound effects, thunder, people with umbrellas, knocking on the door when it had been inside a second before, and it was then outside. I was just blown away. I was like, my word, this is Christmas. 50 times 50. It was just amazing. And then right at the very end, the actor, Jonathan Hyde, fabulous actor, he had this kind of monologue right at the very end, and he puts his hand into his pocket, and because it's all about making money and gold and making the best of yourself, and he's kind of got away with it at the end. And as the light's fading, he throws this kind of gold glitter into the air, and it kind of shimmers as the lights go down. And that's the end of the play. And I was just like, wow, this is what I want to do. This is just amazing. This is so sexy. It is brilliant. And so from then on, I was like a convert to the Royal Shakespeare Company. I suddenly realised, looking back, that I kind of manifested what I wanted to do. Because in that moment, I had a program, and the other guy bought me a program and said, well, look, this is what you do. You have a program and you have a reader that and tells you all about the actors and what it's all about. And I remember reading in the program, right, it said the Royal Shakespeare Company have close ties with the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, right? So another big light bulb in my head went bang. Okay, that's what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, one of the best drama schools in the world. Like, of course, I'm a quantity surveyor. Of course, I'm going to go into the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. I'm going to get a place. Of course I am. Why wouldn't I? So I then started to think, right, how do I get out of first this job? So I left a job and I thought, right, how do I get from here to there? How do I get from here to the Royal Shakespeare Company? First of all, I didn't know anything about theatre, literally nothing about theatre. So I thought, well, I should probably do some course on performing arts or something. So I found one which was up the road for me. I applied there and I got money to go there because I was kind of older student or whatever, and my grades were awful, but I don't know how I got it. Anyway, I got that. I did that for 2 years and it was brilliant because it was a great grounding in theatre, and we did some dance, Sarah, you'll be pleased to hear. We did do a bit of dance and we did some technical theatre. I did some directing and music and sound and lighting and acting. And I still thought, right, okay, well, I'm going to do this for 2 years. And I just soaked up everything. I just took everything, all the plays, everything. We did history of theatre and I just sucked it up and I just was learning everything from nothing over those 2 years. And I remember one of the teachers left and then we were looking for another teacher and they kind of auditioned them at this place. It was a bit weird. And this guy came in, he was a professional actor. And I was like, he's the guy for us. Really, what I was thinking, there's another 29 students there. And I was thinking, no, that's the guy for me. Leo Dove, he's a professional actor. That's what I need. I need somebody to help me, right? So I really pushed hard. And because I was a bit older, maybe I had a bit of sway in the group. I don't know. Freddie managed to join. And he helped me work on my pieces. And I wasn't very good. I really wasn't very good. I applied to Guildhall, and I only applied to Guildhall. I mean, looking back, it's ridiculous. My mother conned me into applying to some universities. I applied to Reading and Middlesex, but my heart was not in that. The only drama school I applied to was Guildhall because of the programme saying close ties with the Royal Shakespeare Company, right? So I'm like, that's it, that's the place. So for my first audition, he knew I wasn't very good. I knew I wasn't very good. So I did sorry, this is a very long-winded answer to your question, but you'll see where this is going, I think, already. And I did a sonnet for it, right? So I went in and I did a sonnet for my audition, and I did another modern piece. And I remember the panel saying, "We've never had anyone come in and do a sonnet before." It's like so original. And they said, "You're through to the next round on the very virtue of just doing a sonnet. Like, fair play to you." And then, but they said, "But when you come back, you have to do a classic. You got to do a dramatic piece. You've got to do a classical piece." So I went away and I was like, "Oh wow, okay. So I've got a recall. All right, okay, this is good." So the recall is like 2 days, where you do your pieces and you show it to maybe more than one teacher. And then you do movement and things, you do lots of banging the drums and jumping around and to see if you're, willing to be directed and stuff like that. And for that, I did something from Christopher Marlowe, a play called Edward II. So I did that. And I'd learnt it. And this is ridiculous, but I learnt it because at the college, we had a library. And in the library was a record. And on this record was like 1950s version of Edward II, kind of guys speaking like this, they all like kind of John Gielgud. And so I kind of did an impression of that. I just kept going in there every lunchtime and listening to this album, right? Listening to this speech. So I learnt it from that. I remember I did the piece and then it was redirected and somebody else did it. And then on the second day, I remember my voice coach, Patsy Rodenberg, coming and going she went, "Look," she said, "we want you to come in and do it again," right? I think what had happened was I was on the cusp of it. And I think she was on my side, which was brilliant. She's a great person having your side. But I think a lot of the other teachers were going, "Oh, no, not him, not him." So I then had to go into one of the rooms in front of literally 10 of the kind of faculty and do this piece again, like she'd kind of directed me. She could see something in me. And I did it again. And I was absolutely bricking it. I was absolutely bricking it. And I managed to get through it. And I got to the end. She just said to me on the way through, she just said, "Do it like we rehearsed." And I did it. And you know what? By golly, I got in. I got in. I got a place, right? There was weird because there was a Jamie O'Donnell and there was a James O'Donnell, right? In the same recall. And I remember the guy saying he had to read it twice because it could have been Jamie or it could have been James, right? And I was like, okay. And just to make sure, and he said, "No, James, it's James O'Donnell, you're in." I was like, "What? I'm in," right? When everyone else was celebrating and stuff, he said, "Have you got any questions? Anyone got any questions?" And I was the first, put my hand up, I said, "Yeah, great." And I said, "Is it true that the Guildhall School of Music and Drama has close ties with the Royal Shakespeare Company? That's the whole reason I wanted to go there, right?" And he said, "Not anymore. It's more the National Theatre." And I remember going, "Oh, I know. Oh my God." And I just went, "No, I've just made the biggest mistake of my life." And you know what? Thousands of people auditioned for this drama school. I should be delighted, but I was a bit like, that's the only reason I wanted to go there was because of that. And that was how I ended up getting into the arts, was through this mad. I mean, since then I've sort of looked at, there's a brilliant book called Manifest by Roxy Nafusi. And I realized that I manifested this life. I even changed the way I spoke. I got a little booklet of how to speak properly because I had a proper South London accent, kind of "Gall blimey, mate, all right, how's it going?" sort of thing, And I changed the way that I dressed, and I changed the way that I spoke. I mean, I literally changed the whole of my life to fit this thing. And I remember getting there and just going, "Oh my word, what have I done? What have I done?" And that's literally how I got into the arts, was through one night at the theatre, and it just moved me entirely. It really was magical. magic. When it's brilliant theatre. Whether it be straight plays or musicals, when you see something, you're hooked if you see something brilliant. And I saw something brilliant, and there we are, here I am, I'm talking to you guys on a podcast. It's mad world.
When you got in, how did your mum react when you said to her, I'm gonna be an actor?
Well, let's take it back a bit. When I said I was giving up my job, which paid her some rent and was a good job, a solid job, a job with a career progression, all that kind of stuff. And I said, do you know what? I'm going to go to college and I'll become an actor. She cried. She went, no. I was like, no, I can't continue doing this. I can't do this. She cried. She was absolutely gutted, because she could see that it was a good opportunity for me, I couldn't, but I sort of stuck at it. I just decided that I wanted to be in the arts. Thinking back as well to school, I liked words. I always liked words, and I wrote a bit of poetry as a kid, and I enjoyed stories. It didn't really come from nowhere, but it felt like on that night that it did come from nowhere. But I think looking back, maybe I had an appreciate. I definitely wasn't somebody who was into mathematics or into kind of science. I was definitely into physical education and also sports and also English and history and geography, all those kind of things. Humanities. I loved all that kind of stuff. And I think she was a bit more supportive once I got into drama school, because I think it was like a big deal. And what was brilliant back then, and I think many of the listeners, if they're not of my kind of vintage, will be surprised to hear, is that all of my fees were paid for. I had to get like a small student loan. Yeah, it was all paid for. It's gone now. You have to pay for it now. Like me and my nephew went to university, he's 60 grand in debt, But then it was paid for. And I think those days should come back. And I think the arts are really important. I think that's something that they should definitely look at. But yeah, so I got my fee paid for, and it was brilliant. And 3 years of dedication to it. It's really, I think that's something that's not right, But anyway, look, and what you suddenly find out when you go from being in a small college to being like drama school, it's like they pick really good people, and you suddenly realise you're not. Well, not that I thought I was any good really anyway, but I thought I'm really not very good now. I came in and there's all these people who've done National Youth Theatre and things like that, serious kind of actors, and it was me who'd been a quantity surveyor for 4 years. I suddenly realised you can't talk, you can't walk, you can't act, you can't do anything. And it's a great leveller. If you thought you were going in there being really confident and cocky, you just suddenly go, I can't do anything. I thought I could do things. I thought I could act. I can't do anything. So it was really building it up and working away and just learning from just some of the best teachers. I just had brilliant teachers. Just inspiring and excellent teachers. Even today I use a lot of what I learned from them. That was a long time ago that I trained.
Would you have any advice for someone who is trying to get into, say, drama school or dance school, and maybe if like someone who had a similar background to you?
Sure, if I can get in, anybody can get in. Honestly, with the tiny bit of talent, I got in. It's possible. I now teach audition weekends at the Lear. I always say, why not? Why not you? It's there. They've got to pick somebody. I heard the story that I think Paul Mescal, I think he tried a number of times to get into drama school. I'm like, was it 3 or 4 times? He kept coming back. I think that if you don't get in the first time, try again. It shows. And I've been looking into this recently, and I think the thing about being in the arts is you've got to be resilient. You've got to be tenacious. The opportunities come round rarely, and you have to nourish yourself in between those opportunities. And I think it shows great character and great resilience, grit to come back every year. If it's your dream, then you'll make it work. You'll find a way to make it work. If it's really what you want to do, you will find a way to do it. And I'm a firm believer of the universe helping, like the drama teacher Leo Dove coming in and helping me to get into drama school. I was never going to get in without his help and his brilliant advice and just being ready. I think, there's a great thing for being prepared. But I also think, and I do say this in the audition weekend, workshop, when they say no, oftentimes it's because you're not ready and they can see it. And they've seen hundreds of people, thousands of people come through an audition. and they can tell if you're ready or not, or if you're the right fit for them in the drama school, what they're looking for. Or what is it? I don't know. Is there maybe 15, 20 drama schools now? If you can't go there, try somewhere else. There might be somewhere else that you fit better with. Not every drama school has the same ethos. So do your research, find out where you really want to go. But if you really want to do it, you'll find a way to do it, because the universe is very good at providing help for people who know what they want. But you have to know what you want. You can't just go, I want a Lamborghini and all of $1 million or whatever, because it's so unspecific. You're probably better off going into science or something, or becoming a quantity surveyor if you want to do that, because you might make your $1 million bucks from that better than you would in the arts. But if you really want to do it and you're really passionate about it, then that's a good starting place, I think, as a sort of beginning point if you're a bit lost. Yeah, that's my advice.
After training, graduating, what happened next? Where did you go?
All right, well, here's a story as well. Okay, so when we got to the third year, in the third year, you do sort of productions, and you train for 2 years. As I say, I wasn't a great actor, and my casting was pretty terrible. I played old men in like Hobson's Choice. I played kids in the Shakespeare when I really wanted a really good role. I played Mamilius, which is like a kid's part. I mean, I was ridiculously young looking anyway, which I got a lot of work out of once I graduated. But I really had bad casting. The one lead I had was in A Clockwork Orange, and we shared that with Lambda, which is another drama school in London. We toured Holland, the Netherlands, and Belgium and Germany with it, right? Great opportunity. But we were the second block to do it, right? So both colleges were doing Clockwork Orange. They had their cast at Lambda, we had a cast at our place. And when it came to inviting casting directors and agents and things like that, well, they'd already seen the other one like a few weeks before. So nobody really came to see it. I'd had bad casting, and I was rubbish in, it just sounds just awful, isn't it? How I become an actor, I have no idea how I became an actor. But look, I did. I did the agents evening, which is like the most important evening of your life, right? As a performer, when all of the casting directors, all of the agents come, everyone comes to see your work, and I was awful. My monologue was shockingly bad. My duologue was even worse. Like wrong energy. The guy I was working with, it was just all wrong. I didn't spend enough time finding a piece for my monologue, and so that was rubbish. I remember when I was doing it, and I was sort of outside of myself, looking at myself doing this. And I remember a light came on, like somebody had a light on their script. Sort of, they were looking down to see who was coming next. I just was like terrible. I'd no luck. I'd no interest from any agent, casting directors, anybody, nothing. A few of my mates were getting loads. In those days, they used to put it on like a board. Like they tack it on, it would say like Kenny, my mate Kenny Doughty. Look him up, he does loads of stuff. He was really popular. And so I had nothing, I had absolutely nothing. And I was playing Alex in The Clockwork Orange, and it gave me a kind of I don't know, I became that South London boy again. I was really sort of animalistic in my movement. It really changed for me in rehearsals when Kenny said, why don't we shave your head? And I was like, yeah, let's just do it. I shaved my head and I looked in the mirror and I went, that is Alex from Clockwork Orange. That is Alex. That's the leader of the gang. He's the one. And I looked back at this guy with his hair shaved off and I went, yeah, this is it. And it opened something up for me, something as simple as that. And because I'd been really reticent to get into that, because my upbringing had been a bit violent, and I'm from a council estate in South London, and it was rough. And I didn't want to go back to that because I was an actor. I was wearing shirts, wearing like chinos and corduroy trousers and like brown loafers, things like that. I was an actor. And so I looked back in the mirror and I saw this guy and I went, yeah, this is him. But that helped me then. Clockwork Orange, we're encouraged to go outside and meet people afterwards. And I remember this director, lovely director, called Peter Benedict. I mean, he just happened to, I was very frustrated by that point as well. And he was there in the bar, right? And he's the director. And I remember going up to him and going, hi, are you a director? And he went, yeah. And I went, can I audition for something you're directing? And he was like, who is, he went, okay, all right. This is like the penultimate thing. I was thinking like, I knew what my casting was in the musical, which was next. We were doing Kit Kat Club. I was Bobby. Nobody knows who Bobby is. I had fun doing it, but like I knew my casting was, and I flunked everything else. I hadn't got into it, so and I just kind of sort of just went up to him and just said, "Can I have an audition?" And he went, "Okay." Luck would have it that he was auditioning for something, sort of like the next week, and he said, "Yeah, come in." I don't think he expected much, but I thought, "Oh, I've got an audition." So I went in and auditioned, and I got a part. I was doing a bit in the Kit Kat Club, but I was rehearsing during the day and getting paid like, £100 to be an actor in this open air play. And so I was the first to be acting, I think, or maybe second, first or second, without an agent, without anything. Just by the very fact that I just went up and said, "Can I have an audition?" From that, I got an agent, and then so I was off. It's really sort of funny because sometimes you just have to push it a little bit. You have to make things happen yourself. And I think that's one thing that I thought was really important. And then, of course, I invited to every show I did, the Royal Shakespeare Company. And even when I left, everything I was in, I invited the Royal Shakespeare Company. They must have got so many letters from me. It was ridiculous. Never any reply, never anything back. Never came to see anything that I was aware of. I was just literally beginning to give up hope after about 3 years. And I've been working away, filling in bits like you do with temping and doing rubbish jobs, ticket master, terrible job. Oh my God, terrible. Just filling in the gaps in between acting. I remember it was a Friday afternoon and my agent called me up and said, "Oh yeah," and also as well, I was properly obsessed with the Royal Shakespeare Company. So like I'd go in the summer, I'd see 3 plays, Saturday matinee, or no, Friday night, Saturday matinee, Saturday evening, stay over, come back on kind of the Monday or whatever, Sunday. Travel back on the train, So I did that twice a year. So I'd go up and see a show in the winter. And when they're at the Barbican, of course, which was next door to the drama school, we had tickets to go and see. So I see everything there as well. I knew all of the actors, directors. I knew everything about the company. So when on that Friday afternoon, my agent said, "We've got an audition for you." Okay, what is it? Royal Shakespeare Company. I was like, yes, yeah. 3 years I've been waiting for this. 3 years. I was ready for it, right? I went, right, who's the director? Michael Attenborough, yeah, great, know his work. Ed Hall, know his work. Who's in it? All of the people who I admired the most were in it. I was like, this is mine. This is so mine. They started rehearsals already, and so I was kind of late. They couldn't find anyone to play this role, and it just landed in my lap. And I went in and I auditioned for it, and I was just so focused on getting it. And I remember, no, sorry, it was the Thursday that it did it. I remember it was the Thursday. I auditioned. I remember I got off work and I went off and I did the audition down in Clapham in the rehearsal rooms, and they were rehearsing. And you can imagine walking through, looking in the door and going like, there's all the people I've been watching on stage in Stratford. Literally that winter, all of my favourite actors were in it, right? I was like, I've got to get this. I have to get this. I met with the casting director first of all, and she was like, great. That was on a Wednesday. Then I met with Michael and I met with Ed on the Thursday and I auditioned for them. I had to do something from the play, and it was Henry V and Henry IV, Shakespeare. And I did that. And they said on the Friday, they said, okay, you've got the part, you start on Monday. I mean, mad, absolutely mad. When you think that like 7 years from being a quantity surveyor to being in the Royal Shakespeare Company, one of the best companies in the world. I just had the best year and a half. I learned how to act. I followed a brilliant classical actor called Des Barrett. I followed him around. He was playing Falstaff. I was like his boy, and it was the best training I've ever had. Him and David Troughton was playing Henry IV, the King. Will Houston was Henry V. He's a great Northern Irish actor. It was amazing. It was amazing. And in that season, there was like a Declan Conlon, who you might know, Who else was in it? David Tennant was in the season. You know what I mean? He was playing like next door kind of thing. He was doing other plays, and it was just brilliant. It was just the most amazing. And it was all over the millennium as well, So it was all over sort of 99, 2000. It was really special. And it was amazing. I just had the best time. And to cap it all off, right at the end, I got nominated for an award. There's a thing called the Ian Charleson Award, which is for young actors under the age of 30 doing classical theatre. Ian Charleson was the guy who was in Chariots of Fire, if you remember. He was the guy who ran with his head back. He found classical theatre later on in his career after having a film career, and he set up this award, and it's still running now. I was there with David Oyelowo, who went on to win it that year, and Chiwetel. And yeah, I got nominated for it. I went to National Theatre. Derek Jacobi gave me, this little sort of plaque thing, and I sat there with all the other actors and stuff. It was just mad. And I just went 7 years, 7 years, 8 years from when I thought I can do that to actually doing it and being in it and living that life. Classical actor is just absolutely astonishing. So I go back to what I said before. If I can do it, anyone can do it. But you got to know what you want. You have to know what you want. And I knew exactly what I wanted. I think after that, the problem came that I didn't have any more dreams. I sort of ran out of dreams. I went, I don't know what else I want to do. I'd sort of said to my agent, I don't want to do adverts. I don't want to do soaps. I really just want to be a classical actor. That's what I said to them. And when it came up, I was just ready. I knew everything I needed to know. If I had to do my research, I knew everything about the company. Done the backstage tours. I literally bought the T-shirt and sweatshirts with the Royal Shakespeare Company written on it. I had pads and books and with their logo on. It was astonishing. I think it just goes to show if you've got drive and you've got passion, you can overcome anything. I wasn't a great actor, but I had heart and I had passion, and sometimes that'll get you through. That'll get you there. So that's my journey to actually working. And I went other places and I did other things, and I had quite a nice career as things go. But in the end, I ran out of dreams. That was after a while. Kind of roles for playing young boys dried up for me. I started to look a little bit older. I was over 30 by that point. I can't really play 12-year-olds when you're 30. And then after a couple of years, then I kind of transitioned into directing via my stand-up comedy, obviously, like you would. I tried stand-up comedy for about a year, and the apathy killed me. I did my shtick, and people just sit there and look at you and just go, "What? It's not even funny. I don't even know what you're doing." But with that, you have to have a passion for that. And I was like, nah. And then I did some improvisation, and that wasn't fit. And I was like, nah. And I kind of did bits of acting, but and then I got into directing, and I just, and that's really what I've been doing since, is directing and writing. And then I kind of think back to that play. Like I said, I was really taken by the way that they changed from outside to inside in The Alchemist, and also that bit, the end where he throws the glitter up into the air. And so maybe being a director was kind of in me anyway.
And that transition from actor to director, writer, was that an easy transition for you?
It was a difficult transition because I still had actor blood in me. And I think sometimes as a director, you've got to stand outside of that. I am still, as a director, I'm still on the side of the actor. I still feel I'm sort of a paid up member of the acting fraternity. And so I kind of straddle that place of being a kind of a director actor. And I do feel a bit of envy for some of the directors who haven't acted, who are just directors, because there's kind of a purity about what they do, and they go, no, I'm just a director. Don't get involved in the acting. You sort stuff out with the actor. I'm going to do the directing. I'm in there kind of being like a conduit between the actor and the directing. But when I first started, I kind of, again, like being the actor years ago, was kind of trying to emulate other directors. Who did I really like? Well, I obviously I loved Michael Attenborough, but Michael Attenborough had such a purity about the way that he directed. It was beautiful scenes and flow, and it was just beautiful scenes, he would create. And Ed Hall was all about the kind of gimmick. No, that's not fair on Ed. No, it's not bad. But he had a more of a kind of a way of turning the material into something that the audience could understand in a kind of pop culture kind of way. It's hard for me to explain, but other directors like Stephen Pimlott, who's no longer with us, used to do brilliant things in studio, but couldn't translate what he did to the big stages. And Sam Mendes is just a majestic director. He's great. I'd read books by Katie Mitchell or Declan Donnellan, and I was a member of the Young Vic Directors Scheme, which was brilliant, run by David Land. And it was amazing because you got, again, free tuition. You'd have workshops with different directors. And early in my career, they had a thing called Springboard, which was meant to kind of springboard you into a first production. And we had brilliant directors. Natalie Abrahami was there, Carrie Cracknell, David Land came and talked to us. And they were just different directors, and they shared with you their ways of directing. For a while, I kind of was going down that direction of emulating them, and they were all really clever. They all went to university, kind of the Deborah Warners of the world, who are just brilliant directors, but they're so clever. They know everything about the play. You know, they know more about the play than the person who wrote the bloody play. You know, they're just phenomenally gifted, clever, talented people. You know, and I'm kind of, you know, in my heart, I'm probably still a quantity surveyor, you know, masquerading as an artist. I tried for a bit to be that really clever director, and it didn't fit. I was sort of cutting against the grain because I was trying to be someone that I wasn't, you know. So it took me a long time to find my way of directing. And, you know, I'm quite, as you could probably tell, I'm slightly quite an emotional person. And I tried to shut that down. Don't be emotional, just be clever. So I did a lot of that and not really connecting with the work. So yeah, so I sort of struggled at first to transition into being a director because I had a fixed view of what a director should be. And there isn't a fixed view of how a director should be. In the same way, there's not a fixed view of how dancers should be. You know, if you say, for instance, if you went to the Royal Ballet and you saw, you know, some of the brilliant dancers like, you know, Carlos Acosta or something there, you know, and you looked at him and you go, well, that's how a dancer should be, then you've just got that one view of that dancer and you want to then emulate to be like Carlos Acosta. But nobody can be really like Carlos Acosta because he's, you know, he's himself. He's him, and he's taken anyway. So you can't be Carlos Costa because he's Carlos Costa. So I didn't really have a way of getting into it. So I just, over time, working and going to class, seeing out other directors' workshops, and the brilliant Lindsay Turner, Ian Rickson, brilliant directors. Ian Rickson is probably the nearest to how I like my directors. I did quite a lot of workshops with him, and I found him very human, great humanist, great advice, really good mentor to me in terms of my directing. But ultimately, I think when you try to do something new for the first time, I did do at college, we did do kind of directing, how to be a director, stuff like that, when I did the college pre-drama school. But it doesn't prepare you for directing. You have to find your own style. You know, I'm not
being an actor who has worked with James as a director, you make it very accessible to both the actor and audience, and that's a very, very hard thing to do. As you said, you can have a really clever director, and that's great, you know, it might look beautiful, but if it's accessible to an audience, or if it is just to the audience and not the then what is the point? That is my opinion.
I think also as well, when I was first doing my first little bits of directing, I kind of forgot the audience. I kind of worked so much with the actors and the material, and I forgot that actually it's performative. I think that my issue with some directors, they forget that the audience are going to see it. You know, I don't think they forget, but maybe their bias is different. Maybe they're having such fun in the rehearsal studio, imagining these worlds. You know, and I talk about, you know, directors like kind of Katie Mitchell, who's brilliant, brilliant, brilliant director. But she's quite science and quite, let's look at this and let's look at that, and, you know, let's really build the world 360 degrees. And I kind of like, I've sort of switched what I think about it to actually thinking that it's make believe. I mean, of course, it is all make believe, but there's no point trying to make theatre like it's real life in some respects. You know, you have to remember that there's, you know, hopefully, if you're lucky, more than two people and a dog sitting there watching it, you know, and that you have to think about what they're seeing. There's a really good exercise that I learned quite early on as a director from my days at the Young Vic. And one of those was literally when you first read a script, you go through and you mark what you're feeling as you're going through it. I write in the margin, like bored, don't know what's going on, great twist, exciting, or didn't see that coming, that kind of stuff. Because what that does is, that is how the audience sees the play. And when you work on something endlessly, day after day for 3 weeks, you don't have that value of that first look. How the audience is going to see it is those twists, when you've been working on it for 3 weeks, aren't surprising to you anymore, but they're surprising to an audience. And so if you do that when you first look at a script, you all of a sudden go, oh yeah, that makes sense, that does that, and that's going to spark something in the audience. I'm always trying to make it clear for the audience, and I learned this from Michael Attenborough. Michael Attenborough rewrote Shakespeare. Yeah, shock horror. Academics will be switching off at this point going, you can't rewrite Shakespeare. Yeah, you can. Because it's a performance. It's in front of an audience. And so we wrote bits, we cut bits, we edited bits that didn't make any sense. Because you just go, the audience aren't going to know what that is. Cut it. Or rewrite it. Because the worst thing is for you when you direct and you put something in front of an audience and the audience have that moment of going, what was that? Or they get what we call speed bumped out of the performance and they're really engaged in it. It's flowing. Go, what did he say? And by the time you got round to that, and sort of, what was that? What have I missed? Where's the plot? And if not clear, then they've missed half the play, and they lose interest, and it's really hard to get them back. So the best way is to keep them engaged in what you're doing, and for that you have to have one eye in the rehearsal room, one eye on the audience. You've got to have that duality. If I did earlier on, you have too much in the rehearsal room with the actors, you miss that. You do it too much the other way, you miss this. So it's a real fine balancing, act between the two, of being able to make sure that symbiotically there's some connection between the actors and the audience, and it's balanced. A balance, it's really hard to do. I don't know if I've ever really achieved it, but I'm trying. Every production I come to, I'm always trying to get that symbiosis between the two, but it's tricky. The really good directors, like Lindsay Turner, Ian Rickson, they're brilliant at it, absolutely amazing at it.
You live in Ireland now. How was that transition? Have you noticed any differences or similarities also as well in terms of funding for the arts in the UK and Ireland? If you've noticed anything that works really well.
So I think in London there were so many theatres. Like, I wanted to know what was going outside of London as well, what was happening there. Like, there's Manchester and Liverpool and Plymouth and Bath, and so many. I went to different theatres all over the place, and there's some brilliant stuff happening outside of London. I applied to the Arts Council in England and I didn't get funded, and I've applied to the Arts Council in Ireland. I haven't got funded, but I have been funded for stuff which is developmental. So I have got some money from the Arts Council for that. For that, I didn't think I was going to get funding, and I did. And for productions that I put forward, I haven't got funding for, where I thought I would. Like, you can get the meetings, I think, in England. I had meetings at the Royal Shakespeare Company for directing and the National Theatre. They saw my work and stuff, but actually getting in is a different matter. It's really hard to get in. I think here in Ireland, it's pretty similar. I think it's hard to, it's hard to get in, to try and find a way. So you've got to get a production on, but you can't get funding for a production to then get people to come in and see you. So I've been sort of keeping myself busy. I think that's why I picked up writing again. I used to write years ago with a company called London Playwrights Collective. That was when I was in stand-up improvised phase. I was going, what am I going to do next if I'm not going to act? So I came to Ireland, and one of the first things I did see was that you can't just direct. There's not enough work. It's just simple as that. So I teach, and I'm writing as well, and making theatre, making my own sort of thing happen, which is sometimes you have to do that, just to agitate the pot a little bit. I think here in Ireland, there's some really good opportunities. Regionally, there's really good opportunities for things like Activate down in Longford, the backstage in Longford. I was lucky enough to be on that a couple of years back, and it was brilliant. It was so good. Funded. You've got things like Culture Night, which we don't have in the UK. Culture Night's brilliant. I mean, an evening of culture for anybody who just wants to turn up is just curious. That's all you got to be, is curious. You can come in and see stuff. I think it's brilliant. Ireland's a smaller place, than the UK. There's maybe less opportunities if you're going to devote your craft to being in Ireland. So you have to diversify and do other things. But that alleviates that worry and means you can have a standard of living, even if you're not making work, which is fabulous. Now, saying all that, I know that lots of people have been grumbling about the Arts Council. The Arts Council have to be for making work and making work accessible for artists. The kind of Arts Council and the funding has to get in step with what's going with the artists. I think that there needs a conversation, essentially. And I think that's not what's happened. I think what's happened is people have been applying for arts funding, not got it, and then grumbled with their mates down the pub. And it's come to this point now where it's just built and built and built up. And an open letter has been sent to the Arts Council saying, look, we need to look at this. Fair play to the Arts Council. I think they are listening. Whether they hear, that's a different matter, but they are listening, and that's important, because one doesn't exist without the other. We need the Arts Council, and the Arts Council need us. If there's no art being made, what's the point in having the Arts Council? You might as well just siphon it off to physics or making steel or something. Or quantity surveying, why not? It gets a bad press, particularly through me. So I think there's a conversation that needs to be had. Yeah. On arts in Ireland. But I think that it's a conversation that'll be happening in the UK as well. It's a conversation happening everywhere. And I think post-pandemic as well, I think people suddenly felt that actually art is important, which I think is brilliant. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, and I think we all missed it when it wasn't here. Live events are exciting. If theatre had never been invented, I often think that, what kind of world would we be living in? It would be just kind of things on screen, right? Or like we wouldn't be able to go down and sort of get a ticket and go and see something and sit in an auditorium with other people. People do things live in front of us. That never existed. What a weird world that would be. Strange hell, I think.
Thank you so much, James. I could literally talk to you all day.
Thank you for inviting me. I honestly, it's such a joy to talk about what you're passionate about.